Well, hello, everybody. This is really happening, isn't it? We are here live for the first ever Shiny Developer Series live stream. And thank you all for joining. As you can tell, I'm both excited and probably the most nervous I've been in years doing this. A lot, and I mean a lot of prep work has been going on for this. I may get to that in a little bit, but I am very excited to do this. And if you had seen the very, very beginning episode of the developer series, where I think I actually called it episode 0, I had mentioned that, on top of bringing these connections to the brilliant developers, practitioners, consultants in the R and Shiny communities, that I wanted to start sharing some of the things I've learned along the way too, and learn along with all of you, hopefully joining me in this journey. So this is my first step. I hope this is definitely not going to be the last live stream. In fact, I want to do a lot more of these. So yeah, let's get right into it. Although I do want to take a couple minutes here. It is the holiday season after all, and I am feeling thankful for a lot of things, and certainly with respect to this adventure, I definitely have a few people I want to thank for inspiring me and showing me this is all possible. So before we get into kind of the R and Shiny stuff in terms of what I'm doing to actually build this production, one person in particular has been putting up with probably endless questions of how he's been doing it, but I want to give a huge shout out Martin Wimpress, who is the director of the desktop computing and Snap teams at Canonical. Those of you who follow Linux might know that Canonical is the vendor that provides the Ubuntu operating system. Martin has been doing some live streaming of his own in his Linux adventures, and he kind of showed me this was all possible with open source software and a little kind of magic to integrate it all together. So Martin, I don't know if you're watching or not, but if you watch this after the fact, thank you. And again, thank you for putting up for my endless questions on live streaming with Linux. Okay, and then with respect to the Shiny and R side of things, I'm definitely not the first person to stream content about R on platforms like YouTube. We've seen some great content from people like David Robinson, Julia Silge, and more recently, one of my best R friends, Dean Atelli in the Shiny space has started doing this. So that's what I just wanted to join in on the fun. You all can't have all the fun here. But speaking of all of you, one thing that I want to make sure these streams are is highly interactive with all of you. So with that, let's say hello to our chat room. Hello, chat. Hope you're all doing great. I want to give a shout out to those that have joined that I see have been saying hi. So Dean, thank you for joining. Dean and I have been sharing lots of notes back and forth on this adventure that we both are embarking upon, and he's already knocked it out of the park with his recent stream. So give a follow to his channel if you want to see the stuff he's up to. Maya, hello Maya. She was a previous guest on the developer series. Thomas, hello. Emicler, sorry, the font's really small on my screen. Hello. Batul, hello. And Shuthram, I believe. Yep, hello there. So please chime in. And Magvi, hello. If you have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll do my best to keep up, but I want all of you to, like I said, join in all the fun and what we're learning together. So with that, let's kind of give you a little background on what I want to talk about today. First, let's do a little housekeeping, if you might say. So what you see on the screen here is the home site for the Shiny Developer Series at shinydevseries.com. We have links to all the previous recordings that we've done, all the great guests that you can see in the recent post here. And we will also have this stream after the fact posted on the website as well. And in speaking of kind of shaping the direction of where I want to go with these streams down the road, in the description below, I'm new to the pointing thing. There is a link to a very short survey that I love to have your input on to kind of see what topics you all are interested in, where you're generally going to be tuning in from. I definitely want to make this, again, highly interactive, and you can see it's very basic, maybe 3-4 questions at the most, but a lot of these general topics that I've been thinking about for a very long time. I'd love to get your take on if you like those ideas too, and if you have other suggestions that you don't see listed here, go ahead and submit that in your responses. So you can take that anytime you like, and I'll be keeping tabs on that as we go. Looks like we have some more people joining. Hello, Richard. Hello, Beats and Marco and Yanni. Yanni, hello. You're gonna have some stuff featured later on, so buckle up for that. So let's get to the main topic at hand. I have been learning a lot in my kind of development journey with Shiny, especially this past year. I've released at the end of this year, in fact, I'm finally, and I do say finally, started my time off, which is why I get to do this on a Thursday afternoon. I released 3 major applications either earlier this summer or late this year. They all involve Shiny in very complex ways. One of them very, very complex that I had to go down to the wire for. And I've been experimenting with a lot of different technologies for not only within the app itself, but also how I develop the application. And one of the things I've been playing with quite a bit is the concept of containers. And containers, if you don't know what those are, they're kind of a way to encapsulate your system requirements for like at an operating system level and any software you use, and be able to kind of make that reproducible. So I've been having access to some of this both in some personal projects and recently at the day job, where we started to use containers quite a bit for some of the application services we've been doing. And what's nice about this setup is that you can containerize almost anything, but I've also found a way to augment it with multiple development environments in R itself. And that leads to what we're going to talk about today. So I have started a repository, and that's again linked in the description below. I've called it R Dev Projects. I'm super creative with my naming, right? But this is going to contain the various bits that I've kind of learned throughout the probably past 6 months or so that I'm now using in my home kind of development environment for R and Shiny projects. And what's nice is that in typical situations, I would install things on my personal system like R itself and all the packages, any libraries that depends on it would all just be in that one system. And I would just kind of add on as I go, upgrade R as appropriate. And there were times where it was kind of hard for me to manage it a bit. Plus, there were other times that maybe I was experimenting with something kind of esoteric, maybe a package that needed some really odd system library, and maybe I try it out once and I never use it again. So I wonder if there's a way that I can kind of make these more disposable. And again, that's where containers come in. And to show you that I'm definitely doing something different here, let me put in my terminal here. We'll get to what the bits are in a bit, but if you'll be surprised, maybe or maybe not, to know that this system I'm running right now does not have any trace of R in it. And no, this is not me, trying to be funny here. I want to keep this system absolutely pristine of things unless it's meant for media production. But that doesn't mean I can't do development work on here. I certainly can with containers. And so that just proves to you that this system has no trace of R whatsoever. So I have two environments I'm going to show you, but they're both based in containers in different ways. But I've always been of the mindset that it's great in open source and in the community to have choices. And we definitely have choices with respect to what we use to develop our R code or even Shiny apps or just anything of R in general. Most are likely familiar with the RStudio IDE. It's world renowned. I use it every single day at work, in all my projects at home. I'm obviously very much thrilled with the team and the products they make, the packages they make. And then there's been another environment that I've been using a bit at work, especially for projects that deal with not just R, but other languages that I'm integrating as part of a whole, you might say, production setup. That is Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code does not have native R functionality, but there has been an emerging space in terms of extensions and add-on packages that are quickly making Visual Studio Code a pretty nice environment for R development. And I did not think this was going to be possible so soon, but thanks to the awesome community, it definitely is. And in fact, in terms of where this whole container story fits in, as I was starting to learn Visual Studio Code a bit for some personal stuff, I heard some people mention about developing inside containers. And there was this great article that I somehow got linked to or I stumbled upon in Google searching, I don't remember which. But they showed this concept that you have your local operating system that has, say, Visual Studio Code on it, but then it can map into containers that have whatever libraries, whatever system utilities that you're going to use for your project, and it can be simply a front end to that. That really got my attention. I thought that was pretty snazzy. So I thought, you know what? Let's have an adventure. Let's try this out with R. And so, as I mentioned, some brilliant members of the community have been getting together. I'll get to that part in a little bit. But Kuhn Ren and other contributors have been making this extension for our support for Visual Studio Code. And it's been getting a lot of updates this year and last year. And it's really starting to get, I would say, a lot more polished. And so I thought, okay, it's a good opportunity to try learning this and see how it works for my workflows. So that's what we're going to see now, is how I've integrated this extension and a few others with Visual Studio Code in this, what you might say, containerized setup. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our Visual Studio Code window here. There we go. Now, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio Code, it is produced by Microsoft. It's quickly becoming one of the most popular IDEs for general programming software development. It is based upon a framework called Electron, which is a way for you to install applications fairly seamlessly across multiple operating systems like Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. I run everything I do at home on Linux. I'm a very happy and passionate Linux user, and Visual Studio Code works just the same on Windows or Mac, so or Linux for that matter. So this is what you get when you open it up. You just obviously have a clean slate. In order to make all this work, there were a couple extensions I needed in this, you might say, the host operating system. And we can look at those here in my panel. There is a extension called Remote Containers. That is very fundamental to making all this work. That's all free. It's all on the Visual Studio Code Marketplace, I believe it's called. You would want to install that. I also recommend getting the Docker extension because obviously with these containers, you need some orchestration engine to make all that work. And Docker is one of the most popular softwares out there for creating containers across the different operating systems. I'm a bit biased here, but I think on Linux it works the best. There are a couple of hoops you have to jump through on Windows and Mac OS, which I don't really have time to cover myself, if not only because I don't really use those operating systems as much as I do Linux. But those are the two that you'll want for making all this work. So we'll now jump into opening my folder for the development projects. And by the way, if you, again, have any questions in the chat, feel free to chime in as you'd like. I will keep tabs on that as we go. So let me go ahead and open up my folder here. Now, we're not going to build this in the container just yet. We're going to close this bit for now. But let's talk about what is in this kind of setup. And this gets to be a little involved. I won't admit that I understand 100% of all of it. But the documentation that I was showing earlier in the Firefox browser for what article that Microsoft had put together gets you up and running fairly quickly. And you can try stuff out in other languages just to get a feel for how it works. And then there is somebody in the community that made an R version of that kind of development setup. We're going to look at some of those files here. The two main files that drive all this are as follows. So there is a dev container.json file, and JSON, if you're into Shiny, you know that JSON is like the fundamental way of how bits get passed back and forth between R and the Shiny kind of web process and vice versa. So this is just a way to kind of capture the metadata that this container depends on. So there are links in both this file as well as in the README of the GitHub repository that I'm walking through today that has all more information. But we give it a name and we say what kind of build is it. We're going to build it from a Docker file. We'll get to that Docker file in a little bit. And then these run args, I honestly don't have much idea. I just took it from what the example had. Mounts are going to come in handy. This is going to be ways that you can map certain directories on your host file system to your containers. And those with sharp eyes see that I'm referencing a folder with the name renv, which we're going to use for package management in these containers. There's probably a lot of questions I'll get about that in a little bit, but we'll just kind of dive into the rest as we go. Then you get to these container-specific settings, and this is where you can do some customization that are for your extensions that you're using in Visual Studio Code for the container you're going to run. And you'll notice I even customized the shell within the Linux container to not be the typical bash shell. I'm using something called fish. That's what this one is right here. Credit to, again, Martin Wimpress and others in the Linux community for making me aware of fish. It's a really nice terminal, nice auto completion, great customization. And so I started using that a bit at my home setup, and I really like it. So I can say that's going to be my Linux shell. These bits here with the R prefix are specific to the Visual Studio Code extension for R support. We'll probably get to what those mean as we go along, but this is one that probably will catch some eyes. The terminal for R itself, I'm not using the base terminal. I'm using something called Radian. Radian, we'll see what it looks like in action shortly. That is a alternative R console, ironically based in Python, but hey, you know, I don't judge. I use any tool that does my job well. So Radian is really nice. It's got kind of like what the fish shell is doing to my typical bash shell. Radian is kind of doing to the R console. Lots of syntax highlighting, lots of auto completions. It just is a bit friendlier. And the nice thing about this is that in this containerized setup, I don't need Radian on my host system. This is all going to be built in dynamically in the container itself. So little bits here and there. I do have an alternative path to R itself. That's based on what image in the Docker hub I'm basing it off of. And then this is where you say, okay, these extensions for Visual Studio Code, I want installed in the container itself so that it will appear as if I installed these on my host system, but I didn't. These are actually just on the container that I'll boot up here. And so this is the main kind of, you might say, the driver extension for R supporting Visual Studio Code. There's some other ones like editor support, R Lisp, I believe. This Excel viewer, it's nothing to do with Microsoft Excel, just as a way, I think, to visualize data frames in a grid kind of layout. A new one that I just started playing with respect to Shiny called Shiny Snip, which I got a great awareness on Twitter recently. That lets you do like little snippets of Shiny code and have it compiled right in. And then a newer one that's still early days, but a full supported debugger extension with R code that uses the Visual Studio Code native debugging routines. So that's going to be an adventure to learn. I haven't mastered it yet, but this container lets me try it out. These other bits I think are completely optional, which is why I commented them out. So with that, let's look at the Docker file a little bit. Now, Docker itself can be pretty complex to learn at first, but I've been very fortunate that I've been able to learn from a couple very, very helpful projects, especially in the R community, to get me up to speed with how I can use Docker with R itself. So let me transition back to our browser here. That would be the Rocker project. If you haven't heard of Rocker, this is Docker containers that are built specifically for R, even for things like RStudio, which will be coming very handy later on. It's led by Carl Boenger, Dirk Edebutel, and Noam Ross has joined the team recently. Credit to them for making this all possible. And with their efforts, I'm able to base my Visual Studio Code container in this called Rocker version 2 repository. Now, I can have a link to it in the README of my repository. But these are specific R version containers for R, and they respun this a bit for R version 4 and above, because they did a lot of things to enhance it with this experience. So some of the highlights of the notes is that these images are now based on Ubuntu, whereas before they were based on another Linux distribution called Debian. But now it's based on Ubuntu, it's even more closer to my host setup, because my operating systems that I run at home for Linux are all Ubuntu or based on Ubuntu. This is another one that's actually a new experience for me, but it's actually paid dividends already. They are using the RStudio Package Manager, RSPM for short, as their default CRAN mirror, meaning that now, in the past, if you ran R on Linux and you had to install a new package, especially ones that, not to sound harsh here, but some of the tidyverse packages that are based in C++ or things like that, they can take a little while to compile from source. And that's what Linux does with R by default. You compile every package from source. Well, it was about a few months ago, or probably longer ago, that RStudio released an open source version of their package manager kind of mirrors, so that now Linux users around the world that are using R like me can use these binary type installs instead. This is going to be huge for speeding up installations going forward. So that was another kind of win in my book for saying, okay, maybe whatever I build should be based on this container instead. So, okay, that's a bit of background. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code and the fun little Docker file here. Yanni says Radiant is really great. Yep, I agree. If only it was easy to install on my work laptop. That's another story. I'm not administering things on Mac OS is not for the faint of heart. Maybe I'm spoiled by all my home stuff. Anyway, so the Docker file, it's pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it, but you basically start declaring what container you're basing off of or what image you're basing off of. And as I've said, I'm basing this off of the Rocker R ver container, and specifically the 402. I only did 402 because that's what I started with, and I don't want to change it right now live. Maybe I'll do that later on if I feel more adventurous. I'm giving you some arguments that are going to be used for a setup script that this is going to source. I added a parameter for installing the fish shell, my username, my user ID in Linux, my user group ID. And then a lot of this part was based on what I saw in the Visual Studio Code repo for these remote containers. They had a Docker file that had a lot of these similar commands. I've just kind of bumped them up a bit. So there's a shell script that I have that's going to install various Linux packages. In fact, I took this verbatim from what they had. And I have some flag wildcards here. So once you try this out, you'll get the hang of it. But basically, this is going to install a whole bunch of packages that are necessary for kind of the core functionality of the container. And then the author of this had a section that was commented out for additional OS packages. And so I decided to install a little bit here because they're going to be used in some R packages I install later on that I want available in the container as a whole. So some of these are like fonts, some of them are for graphics stuff. So I just install, and some of them for like SSL things or XML things. If you've done anything with like HTTR or other things like that, you can see a lot, and Python stuff, which I'll get to in a bit. So that's what that step is for. And then now another advantage of having those Rocker containers is that they have this handy little kind of shell command in the container called install or install2.r, where all you do is you give it the name of the package in like a space separated kind of line here, and then it installs them right off the bat. So I just install language server, renv, and remotes. Language server is the R package itself that ties in with the Visual Studio Code extension. So you must have that in order to actually get the bits working. And then they also have an alias called install.github.r, which is saying, okay, if a package is not on CRAN and you want to install it on GitHub, you just give it the repo owner / the repo name, and it'll install just like anything like remotes install GitHub or anything like that. So this HTTP-GD package is a way to have a nicer plot window in Visual Studio Code that's a little more interactive, a little more dynamic. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be on the bleeding edge, let's try this out too. Then we get to Radian, which I mentioned as that alternative R console prompt. And all I did was I installed Python setup stuff at first. And then I ran pip3 directly to install Radian from the Python package management system. And I'm not a Python expert. I have had to use it a bit this year in some machine learning stuff, but I only know enough to the very basics. I am definitely not an expert there. There were some other bits that were needed for like some .NET Core runtime thing for an R tools plugin, which I think may have been one of those extensions that I had referenced, but I just grabbed a deb package from Microsoft directly for it. And then this is important for RM to know about this custom directory that I'm going to use to host caches of packages. I needed to define an environment variable in the main system-wide R environ file inside the containers like manifest for the R configuration. So I just ran a little echo statement with the two greater than signs to say, okay, append this at the top or append it below, I can't remember where it goes, into this environment file. That way it's aware for everything else. And then this will be important later on, but we need to have a customized .r profile file when we launch renv initially in these containers that are based with Visual Studio Code. We'll get to that part in a bit. And then lastly, we just make sure the container, it has the default running user of me, not root. Because I wanted to make it as close to my local as if I was on a host environment as possible. And getting it to make sure that my username was the same helps with permission stuff down the road. Because Docker and permissions can be a nightmare if you're not used to it. So there is a question in the chat. Richard asks, is there a similar install script to bioconductor packages? I want to say yes, but you probably want to check out the Rocker repo for more details. Unfortunately, I just don't use bioconductor as much in my day-to-day work anymore, but I know they are trying to make sure they have containers or set up utilities that can install packages from a variety of places. And I imagine bioconductor, being such an important part of the R ecosystem, would have something about that. That's a great question. So, okay, that's the container setup. I can even show real quick what one of those shell scripts looks like. It's a bit gnarly, so we're probably not going to look at it all right here. You can look at it in the repo at your leisure, but you can see this is where I add a boatload of packages to add to that install. And a lot of this I didn't make myself. I just add, I think, some bits at the end with like the username stuff. Oh yeah, I did this bit for installing the fish shell and then making some directories. So a lot of that I didn't make myself. But okay, I think we have what we need. And so what you do now is we are now going to build a container based on the bits that we've just outlined here. So let's close this one more time, and then we'll reopen it and get the bits going here. So let's recreate what I'd kind of canceled out before. I'm gonna go to our dev projects, and then now I should get that prompt again. It says folder contains a dev container config file. Reopen folder to develop into a container. Yeah, let's do it. Reopen. It's going to do some bits here. Now you might say I cheated a little bit. I built this beforehand because it does take a good few minutes to install all those Linux bits beforehand to, and I didn't want you all have to just sit through me blabbing during that process. So I did look at that a little bit. So now we're here, but if you're looking at this prompt here, notice that does not look the same as what I had before. We are now in the container in this terminal. I can even look at my current directory here, and we're in /workspaces/rdev projects. So that rdev projects is the folder that I cloned locally from GitHub of all those configuration bits. And if you look on our sidebar here, you see that if I collapse this a bit, we have a few other folders here that I've been doing for like my other development, like my Ames Explorer app that I did in my modules presentation at RStudio Conf a couple years ago. A recent presentation I did about modules at an R user group earlier this fall. In fact, we're going to look at this in a little bit. Shiny Source, my app that I just did for a Tidy Tuesday submission. And my R Weekly contribution stuff and the site for the Shiny Dev Series. So that's all in here. These are mounted in this container. So now this container sees them as if I was on my local setup. So this is really cool. Let's see. So let's I have a question from Dean here. Dean asks, do you use VS Code for general R Shiny coding or only when dealing with Docker? Good question. I've been starting to use it a bit more in some non-container stuff where I had to integrate with other systems, and I kind of wanted a nice way to kind of pivot back and forth between tying to like a Linux library or a Linux utility at work or other means, with Python especially. Like anytime I had to interact with both R and Python at the same time, I started using VS Code a bit more for that it was kind of a nice way to make those integrated pretty well. Now, I will say I don't have like what I would consider muscle memory, so to speak, with all this. It's still very much a work in progress for me. But I'm definitely working on trying to be a little more proficient with it. But yeah, great question. So let's see what it's like to actually launch just some arbitrary R code stuff here. So let's make a folder in here. Let me see if I have a folder. I'm gonna make a folder called sandbox here. Sandbox. Gonna change in there. I'm just gonna touch a R script in here. They're not gonna have anything in it yet, but I want to actually open this folder in the container, and we'll see what it's like to use VS Code with R for a bit. So let's go ahead and open folder again. Now this is where it's going to look a little different than last time. Notice that instead of that like typical file browser prompt, I'm getting this kind of more like kind of text version of it, because now I'm opening a folder while I'm in a container already. So I'm just going to go to RDev project, sandbox, and just hit OK here. And now I got my played out R script here, completely empty, of course. And now let's go ahead and let's launch an R terminal with Radian to do this. Now, this service port thing, I think, is for some viewer stuff, if I recall correctly. But anyway, we can disregard that for now. In Visual Studio Code, you launch what's called the palette. It's kind of like what Sublime Text has. And now I believe the recent release in preview of RStudio itself has a command palette now too. I usually hit F1 on my keyboard, and then I bring this up, and then there's an option with the R prefix to say create R terminal. Go ahead and hit that, and here we are. This is Radian in action here. Oh, it works. We just got a new subscriber. I've been working on those bits for a while. So I like to have a little fun in what I do. So those that grew up in the golden age of video gaming might recognize that little character that's walking to the R logo at top. So have fun. So anyway, Radian, you notice the prompt looks a little different. It's not a typical just like greater than sign. It's got the little R and the $ asterisk. So it looks a bit different, but you can do an ls. We got nothing here. Let's create some objects here. We'll be super creative and make a vector of 1, 2, 3. And then when we want to run this, we just hit, if you're familiar with keyboard shortcuts, I think I have Control Enter, bind it automatically to run this. Now we have an environment object called X. Now what's nice is that when you hover over this in Visual Studio Code, you get a little tooltip kind of that shows the contents of it. So here it's very simple. It's a number from 1 to 3. You know, radical, I know. We can do one for Y, and let's do 4, 5, 6. Run that, and now we got 2 objects here, 4, 5, 6. And then just to be fun, let's do a list of things. We'll do a list x equal x, y, if I can type, equal y. Run that. Now we got 3 objects. Make sure they're all here. And we do a view of an object in Visual Studio Code with this plugin that we're using. We will get a viewer for like list objects. And if you use some widgets, HTML widgets, I believe it's called list viewer. This is basically the same kind of thing. It makes your list into kind of a JSON format, and you can kind of look at it, collapse items, things like that. So, I mean, it's kind of like the list viewer in RStudio, just a little more native like that. And then to show the plotting utilities, we can just do plot XY. I know I'm so creative here. And then this is a plot window here. Now, apparently, my container is a little out of date because this should be a more interactive version, but I must have forgot to do that bit. So by default in Visual Studio Code, when you do a plot, it temporarily makes a PNG file and then renders it as a tab, which is probably fine for a lot of people. But you know, but there's a better version out there. I think when I build a new container, it'll be apparent. So we can close that. And so there really isn't too much more into it. We can look at a data set. But let's have some fun here. Let's actually bootstrap RM for this project right now. And just to show you what that looks like and what's going to happen behind the scenes. So with RM, the best way I bootstrap it from an existing project is through RM init. And then, well, that must be why I didn't get the plot one to show up. There's some libraries not installed. Well, always happens in demos. So RM is activated. We're going to restart the session. Now, we can look at the bits here, what it tells you, but it's saying, okay, use RSPM for RM itself. It wrote a lock file already. So we're going to quit out of this, and then we're going to relaunch it again. You're going to see something kind of crazy happens when we do this. Now, notice that it says, wait a minute, Session Watcher, which is one of the functionalities in this VS Code R extension, requires JSON Lite. Well, wait a second here. I thought I installed all those packages, right? Well, yes, I did in the container, but not in the RM project for this container. By design, RM will not find those system-wide packages. So what do we do for this? We're going to quit out of this. And this is where I need to make a new version of the R profile file. So RM really tries to keep things simple. It just does one line in the .r profile file, the source rm_activate.r, but that's missing all the bits that I needed for Visual Studio Code integration. So my workaround for this, probably not the most elegant in the world, but when I had the container created, I have this RM directory, has a cache area, but look what's in here. I create an R profile file that's kind of with a suffix of -VSCode. I want to override my current .r profile file with this, and then we'll be in business. So easy way to do this, let's just copy this. Then we're going to go to the workspaces, our dev projects, and you can see Fish gives you those kind of auto completions. And we're going to override it directly. And we can look at it together. Okay, wow, that changed a bit, didn't it? Let's look at this together. Maybe I can close this for now. Okay. Now, this is the interesting part, is that if you've done customization in R before, you can do a whole boatload of things in your .r profile file. And so the easy thing you can do is you can detect if you're in Visual Studio Code at the time this file is being executed. So there was some help on the VS Code extension issue tracker. Myself and some others are having difficulty getting RM to work with Visual Studio Code in these container setups. Well, basically we found a little snippet that has to be run before you activate RM for the project. And that's this longish line here. Don't really have time to get into most of it, but basically there's an init script that Visual Studio Code needs for the R integration that needs to be run before the RM stuff. So I go ahead and do that. Then I activate RM, so that now I'm in RM, but that's not quite enough. I want it so that I don't have to manually add each of these major packages that are needed for this integration with VS Code. So again, I use admittedly the same kind of logic. I detect if I'm in VS Code with this environment variable of term program. And then this is where I had to get into kind of the real internals of RM to see, how do I get the names of the packages that are currently in there? Because I don't want to add these every time if they're already in there from like the last time I used the project. So through some digging deep into the RM repo, I found some utility functions that are hidden by default. RM diagnostics packages library. I and a variable called packages within that. That basically, when you do the names of that thing, that gives you a set of packages that you already have as a character vector. Then I'm in business, because then it's simply saying, okay, if language server is not there, which is what the kind of negation here is saying, just install language server. Same with this HTTP GD. If it's not there, just install that. Same with this last one here, this VSC debugger. If that's not there, install it. Notice that I am installing one from CRAN, one from GitHub, whatever the main branch, result is, or one from GitHub, but a specific tag of it. So RM will let you do it either way. It's really nice. And I see what my problem is, folks. There was a typo here all along. That would have stunk if I didn't correct that. I'll have to figure out why I didn't. I think I know why, but later. So now, that's probably why the other plot stuff didn't work, I guess. Or maybe. Anyway, now it's going to say, okay, install the VSC debugger package. And then, it never did get to this point. Okay, now I know where we're going with this. So to get that plotting stuff working, I have to, this is straight from the repo of HTTPGD itself, or one of the blog posts that Kuhn Renna put together. You have to override the default Visual Studio Code plot option in R, and then make your own version of using HTTPGD. Okay, that was a mouthful. We got the R profile set up. Let's go ahead and launch another R terminal again. Let me just go to default terminal here. Make sure I do have, okay. And then we will do F1. Create our terminal again. Now, notice this. Wow, look how fast that was, folks. This is the dividends of using that cache directory that's mounted on my host system. I had the cache already here, and that took, what, a second, 2 tops? They're all here. Everything's here. And now all these bits should be ready to go to do my plot the right way this time. Let's go ahead and run everything again. I must have a HTTPG. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see if I have more typos here. Well, that seems fine. Well, this is where we want to. All right, what did I say? HTTPGD. Whoops, nope, got a little typo there. No documentation in. Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to work on that later. I'm not sure why that happened. That's loaded here just for kicks. Okay, now in Visual Studio Code, when you load a package and you do the : suffix afterwards, you can see all the functions that are exposed. So what's interesting is I thought this snippet was up to date, but now I'm not so sure. Well, we can be really dangerous here. Let's see what's in the hidden. HTTPGD, unless they did an update that I'm not aware of. Maybe that's it. HTTPGD. Oh, there it is. Maybe it was just a missing colon. Let's try that. Yeah, I bet that was it. Now that should be exported. Let's try that. I promise the shiny stuff's coming soon. Don't worry. HTTPGD UR. Boy, I think they've changed functions on me. Okay, well. Whoops. No. Bad command. All right, there we go. So I guess we'll have to debug that one later. But take my word for it. When it does work well. So let's follow a similar process, and let's do it with a Shiny app. We're actually going to do a couple of them. But let's do an app in Visual Studio Code that I know doesn't have any odd dependencies, because first I'm the one that made it, so I know which ones it has. But let's go ahead and close the terminal here. And then we'll close remote connection. I always like to kind of get a clean slate when I do this. It's probably not necessary, but I just go ahead and do it. Make my R dev projects again. Okay, and then yeah, we'll reopen a container again. This should be fairly quick. You know, I bet I know what's happening here. Let's look at my library scripts. Does this one have the typo in it? Yes, it does. That's why. Of course it did. Okay. That's what happened. So I'll leave that bit in there for now, but that's what was happening on in my template file in the main repo. I had that typo and I thought I'd updated it. Apparently not. Okay. So let's go ahead and close that one again. Oh, close folder. Or actually, no, it's close remote connection. And we'll try that again. All right. Looks like some people joining. Mohammed El Fodo. Hi. Oh, yeah. You're the one that clued me in, I believe. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining. And Ahmad El, hello. How are you? Thanks for joining the stream. Okay. So let's go ahead and work my... Oh, Dean, right on top of it, says they changed their function on me just 2 weeks ago. Yep. That's what I get for not checking GitHub repos before you do a live stream. Okay. So let's open my folder here. Actually, yeah, I think I flipped something bad here. Let me rebuild and reopen a container. Okay, so that rebuilt things and we're in good shape. So now we're going to open the app that I worked on a bit earlier, a couple months ago, is Shiny Source. So our dev projects, Shiny Source. And okay. Here we are. Oh, we're going to rebuild here, just in case. This should make things consistent, but yep, we are in. And now you're starting to see stuff that's probably familiar. So this app, like I mentioned before, I made it as part of a Tidy Tuesday submission. And it was using the data source data set. And it is wrapped as an R package with the Golem package. This is by far one of my favorite things to look at for packaging your application as a package, if I can say package enough times. It's made by Colin Fay and the team at ThinkR, and I've used Golem now for 4 major Shiny apps in production, and I am absolutely loving it. And now I have people at work that are using it too, so my master plan of Golem domination continues. Anyway, let's go ahead and run this app in Visual Studio Code, which probably will fail. Well, let's find out. Well, of course, I can't run without an R terminal first. What was that about? Oh, good grief. That was ugly. Maybe we'll just... how do I get rid of all that? Ugh, yucky, yucky. Okay, well, anyway. that was gnarly. Okay. Don't forget to create an R terminal first. All right. There we go. Now, I doubt this will work because this package, this app, if we look at the description file, look at all these imports. Pretty hefty list, but I'm pretty sure I don't have Golem on here. So let's live dangerously. Let's just verify that. Control enter. Yeah, of course not. Why would there be Golem? So let's do what we did before. Let's bootstrap RenV. And in this time, this isn't a clean project by any means. This is a project in the sense that it knows what packages we need. And let's see if RenV picks it up. And RenV init, discovering dependencies. Wow, that was quick. It knew about these packages. You can see it's got a whole big list here from RSPM. And then these are kind of base packages, I believe, or some are not. I'm not sure what the bits are for that. Now, there was a message here. Our markdown package, because RenV saw an R markdown file in here somewhere. But let's exit this because we have to do my profile trick again, if you recall before. So let's capture that. Our profile VSCode. Our profile, and we'll make sure we correct the typo this time that probably is still there. Our profile is right here. Oh, okay, the typo is fixed, at least in this one, but of course this one won't work, but I won't worry about it right now. Now let's try launching the our terminal again. Installing language server, linked. Oh, I love how fast that is. Okay, story time of Eric. At work, we don't have RSPM mapped yet. So anytime I do an RMV or packrat before that, a packrat project, and we were using our RStudio server, which is of course on a Linux server, I would literally just get up, take a walk, maybe go and walk again, because it would take sometimes up to 15 minutes to get those packages installed. So the fact that that was over in about a second, oh, that's just lovely. That's just lovely, folks. Okay, let's run the app again and see how an application in RStudio code looks. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay. Now, I'm glad this happened because not everything is perfect in VS Code yet with dealing with web-based things. So this is not rendering. It's actually running, but we just can't see it. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? There is a workaround that we have to employ. So let me go back to my repo on GitHub, because I found this out the hard way very recently. I have two notes here about kind of some things I'm learning, which I'll be updating as I go. But there were some random occurrences like you just saw right now where you cannot see the Shiny app in the tab of VS Code. And then there's a little workaround you have to do. I have a link to the issue where we discovered this. You have to kind of set an option disabled first, this VSC browser, as false. Run the app, close it, then go back to active and it'll work again. So let's see if my advice actually works here. All little things that you learn when you're on the bleeding edge. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then we'll go back to VS Code here. All right, Control V. Now let's try running this again. And it did, now you can't see it on the live stream, but I have a pop-up window where it did boot up. So I know it's working, so I'm going to close it now. And then I'm going to run that same option, but now back to true. And this now should run the app as a tab. And it does. Yay. Oh, joy, joy. Okay. Now I'm going to move the terminal to the right. I'm going to collapse this, and now we can see Shiny Source in action. We can have fun with this for a minute here before we get to some of the other stuff. This app is based with the BS4- framework by David Grandjean, former guest of the Shiny Dev series. He's the spearheading the R interface project for these awesome UI toolkits, BS4-, Shiny Dashboard Plus, what was the other one? Argon Dash, and there's a few others as well. So awesome project to be in touch with, but let's just make sure that my app works as expected. Basically, it lets you load a data set from this data source dozen set as a scatter plot. And the thing about these data sets is that no matter which one you choose from, their means and correlations should be very similar. So it's kind of illustrating a concept that if you just look at the correlation of two variables, it doesn't always tell the full story. You have to look at the data too. So we can see that the X has that. The Y has a little bit different, not too much different. Okay, so that's working. We'll, in a future stream, we'll enhance this application. It's definitely needs a little work here. But then let's go to the real fun bit that got some attention last time I did it. Let's make an animation. You can see my resolution got a little funky here because I'm kind of zooming in a bit. Let me move. See, I'm still learning the ropes. I want to get the terminal back down. I believe that'll do it. Okay. And I want to make this bigger. Okay. I want my 2 thing here. It's easier for me. We're going to go from dyno to star. And then this will basically create animation frames, if you will, or different permutations of the data set that keep the same correlation structure. So, in fact, I wonder if I'm going to live danger. I'm going to close this. Hopefully that didn't destroy. Okay, the app is still working. All right, lock it in. We're going to make some animations here. Now, in my apps, I've always tried to make sure that when something is happening on the back end and I don't want the user to do anything else, to pop a little pop-up there. But what that gave me is now I have a Plotly plot ready to go. Let me, I need to scroll back up a second to minimize the sidebar. Okay. And now we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to animate the frames from the T-Rex to the star by hitting play here. Have fun watching this. The points are going to magically scatter, but the point I'm not really doing this just to walk through this app entirely. I'm just saying that now we can run an app in VS Code just as if we were using any other IDE without a problem. So there we go. That is Shiny Saurus in VS Code. Let's go ahead and close that. And let me get my... Now here's the thing. I don't know how they get the terminal back. Uh-oh. That's a... Maybe if I do a new terminal, just so brute force it. Okay. Oh, we're back. Okay. See, I'm still learning the ropes here, but it did work. So we have proven that VS Code can work very nicely with a typical Shiny app. Now, let's switch gears a bit because there's another side to this story of containerized development. Let's first quit this. Let's get a clean slate again. And let's get back to, let me close my remote connection. We're going to get back to the main folder. We're not going to open up, build it again, but we're going to look at the other side of the story we're going to close this, is RStudio. So we're going to look at 2 files here that do this, and thanks for staying on. I can't believe I took that long to get through VS Code, but well, thanks for staying on. We have 2 files here. We have what's called a Docker compose file, and then we have a Docker file. Oh, I need to double click it, I guess. I want 2 at once. All right, still learning. Okay. Okay, let's get rid of the terminal for a second. So Docker Compose is an add-on to Docker that lets you kind of establish configuration parameters for your container in a more YAML structure. So if you've done R Markdown before, this should look very familiar to you. This is just YAML. All it is YAML. And so what I've done here is I made what's called a service. It's kind of like your container definition. I've called it RStudio Preview because it is actually using the preview edition of RStudio server, the open source edition. We are going to build it from a Docker file located in this subdirectory of RStudio Docker. And then we're going to mount a few volumes there. So like before, I want that RDev projects folder in the container. So I do it here. I do my SSH profile because I need that for my GitHub authentication. There's that RM thing again, the RM cache folder. And this is the real fun bit. This container, I can inject a configuration of all my preferences in RStudio right at build time so that I don't have to manually change my pane layout, my font size, all that stuff, my editor theme. It's all right there in the config file. I'm going to say, when should it restart? It should always restart unless I actively stop it, and then I'll start it again. I want to map it to port 8686 on my local machine, which will be mapped to 8787 in the container. That is the default port in RStudio itself. And then I have some environment variables in this RStudio.env file, which I'm not showing anything crazy here because this is all running locally on my firewall. So no matter how much you try, you won't be able to get into my RStudio server container, but I give myself a username and password in it. So, okay. Now I have this container running already, but had I not had it running, one thing I like about VS Code is that it has first-class support for Docker development. And I would just do Docker compose up, and then it would build a container right off the bat. Now I already have it, so let's switch to it right now. Here we are. This should look familiar if anybody's used RStudio Server Edition especially. So I'm going to sign in with my user ID and password. Hopefully it works. And look at that, it does work. I am in my RDev, or I'm in my container right now. And I'm in RDev projects, and then let's open up that same app that we just did RM for the first time, Shiny Saurus. Let's open it as a project in RStudio, which is going to be very familiar to, I'm sure, lots of people on this stream. So I reload it. Now here's where the magic really is. Remember, I did all that RM stuff in VS Code. But guess what's aware of it here? If I do RM status, already synchronized with the lock file. This is where that volume thing really comes in handy. Now, I have effectively shared the RM library with two different containers running R and Shiny stuff, and I did not have to fuss with this at all. It is all right here. This gives me the way to pivot back and forth as my mood changes or whatever other reason. I can use either environment to do all this. To me, this is where I get a little geeked out about it. Like, this is pretty darn cool. So I'm going to run the app here just to show you it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll have egg on my face. Loading, loading, loading. Now, what's annoying is that I did not get the app to show up in the viewer window, so you can't see it here. It is definitely running, but you just can't see it. That's one annoyance. But it did technically launch. I'm still working through some kinks about that sort of thing, but it did show up. So you can now pivot back and forth between the two environments, which is, again, really, really nice. So that was set up, again, with two files. In fact, I realized I didn't look at the Docker file. Let's look at that real quick. Go back to VS Code for a second. The Docker file is actually pretty similar in senses to what I did with VS Code, but I largely lifted this from the Rocker project, who had kind of their own Docker file for how they build RStudio Server. I took most of it. In fact, I copied almost everything about it and instead just added things at the very end to bootstrap all this. So like their images kind of stop, their build instructions stop at this point. But then for me, I added these bits right here to install those other dependencies. And again, using the Rocker project to get those other packages here. You can see I haven't updated it yet. Well, actually, no. I still put Language Server here in just in case. I didn't really have to, but I put in RM and remotes. Then the Radiant stuff in case I want to use it in RStudio for whatever reason. The R environment thing. Make sure to expose the port 8787. And then this is all just from their template file. Yep. So this is quite intuitive. So it's all right there. So what we've covered thus far is we've shown a way to bootstrap an environment, containerize environment, and then be able to kind of put in different folders in that same kind of overall structure of where you organize it. And that was under the assumption that you can always use that same kind of meta container for all these different projects. And most of the time that should work fine. But let's try one more to see if it does pan out the way we expect. So for that, I'm going to introduce you to an app that a good friend of mine gave me wind of recently. Let me go back to my browser here. Say hello to Puzzle Math, made by my good friend Yanni, who's on the stream now, as a Shiny app to help teach basic math at an elementary school level. So this would be great for those of you with kids that want to use Shiny to teach some math. Yanni's got you covered. So Yanni has a repo here. It's a Yanni CD/puzzle math. This is a Shiny app that's also wrapped in Golem. So that's cool. And so obviously he's early days of this. So don't worry, we talked about this beforehand. I'm not surprising him with this. But let's see if my container setup works just as well here as it did for Shinysaurus. Because Shinysaurus I made, but I want to help other people in the R community with maybe some Shiny issues or just try things out, maybe enhance a feature here and there. So I want to make sure that my setup can work in those situations too. So let's go ahead. And now in this case, what I want to do is I want to kind of make this its own directory, so to speak, and just kind of copy in the bits I need to create the container environment in that directory. So let's go ahead and use this. And I've done a little pre-work, not too much, but I did a little bit. I want to copy all those bits that I needed for Visual Studio Code integration and that RStudio ID, server Docker container. I want to copy that into another directory that I made ahead of time. Oh, I thought I had it here. Let's yeah, puzzle math. There it is. Yep. Okay, so I want to copy things in there that I need. So what I need for sure is the .dev container in the Shiny puzzle math. I need that in there. What else do I need? I need the let's see, the Docker. Let me look at I need the RStudio Docker directory. Real scientific here, just doing RStudio Docker. All right, that should get me in there. And then I want the Docker compose file. I want that in there. Docker compose in there. Let's see what I have in there. Puzzle math. Let's do a -A to see the hidden files. Okay, dev container is there. Docker compose is there. Docker file is there. I feel like I've got it all. We'll find out one way or another. Okay, so let me close VSCode folder here, and then we're going to open that dedicated folder instead. So let's go file, open folder. Oh gosh, I'm not even sure. Oh, that's what I get for this whole switching bits is not always intuitive. You didn't miss much. I was just copying files. So let's go into here. Puzzle math. Let's open that up. Okay. It contains a dev container configuration file. Reopen folder to develop in a container. Let's do it. Reopen. Okay. Oh, we should rebuild. Let's do that. Okay. And well, that's odd. Okay. Anyway, I may have done something with this before, so that could be why. But let's go ahead and let's create an R terminal here. Let's see where we are. Get WD. Workspaces puzzle math. So we mounted puzzle math in here. And let's go ahead and run the app. Oh, duh. What did we forget to do? We got Bootstrap Golem, folks. I mean, not Bootstrap Golem. Bootstrap RM, because my container didn't have it. So let's try that. Already has a private library. Let's reinitialize with a new library. I thought I'd already... Anyway, yeah, let's do that. Okay, it's resolving missing dependencies. Taking its sweet time. That's a little worrisome. I did a little experimenting with this the other day, and it's possible I may have forked something. Let's see. Oh, it seems like we got it. All right. Restart the R session. Okay, let's restart it. And let's do my bit like before. We have an R profile file here somewhere. Right here. And let's copy over that one that we did before. Let me move the terminal down. This should be in that same place. Our profile. Yep, okay, cp.rprofile VSCode. And then I just borked my path here, workspaces, puzzle math that. Let's open that up. Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot to. I want to change it to .rprofile. All right. Does this have the typo in it? Nope, it doesn't. Okay. That's good, good. All right. Let's reload it and let's try again. Okay, we're here. RM status. Project already synced. Good, good, good. Now let's run the app in Golem. Uh-oh. What's that about? Dependency packages GG Veroni and Magic not available. Well, wait a minute here. They were clearly in the description file. RM, yeah, here's the description file. You can see Yanni's done a great job. He declared all of his dependencies. Why on earth did it not get in there? I thought I saw it show up. Well, let's when I first see these things in RM or packrat before that, I would try loading the package, just see if it loads at all. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, so what is this saying to us? It's saying namespace load failed, unable to load shared. These are the cryptic things you often see on the Linux side of things, I'll dare say. But this RGeos thing, what is that? I don't know. Let's do a little Googling, folks. The first thing we should do is let's do a search for GG Veroni. Let's see what dependencies it has. Okay, so I don't know what any of these are, but boy, that looks a little, that error I got said rgeos.so. What is this? RGeos, interface of geometry engine, open source. Oh, look at that. So, those of you that use R on Mac OS or Windows usually don't have to deal with this. There are some system libraries that this package depends on. Although it looks like OS X needs to deal with this a bit too, in order for this package to work. So this package is a dependency of that GG Veroni. So we need to get this on. So, okay, what is this? Like, what is the thing I need to install? So it must be a system library somewhere. I'm going to have to figure something out. This is Geos. Geos. Okay. Geos Ubuntu package. Now, we're on an Ubuntu-based operating system, so we want to get something that is compliant with what Ubuntu needs. So it looks like libgeos. So I can do this interactively in this container right off the bat to test stuff out by going back to my fish shell. And when the Docker files kind of have these instructions, but what we want to do is, now I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this in my user as of now because I'm not root. Oh, okay, it does let me do that. All right, apt install. Now, I'm going to look back at the, yeah, I'll go back to VS Code in a little bit. I need to check something here first to make sure I've got everything. Now, usually in Linux, when you need these development libraries that are these R packages depend on, it's usually a libgeos-dev. I'm not sure what the ++ thing is there. I'm gonna do a little reach here. So anyway, I'm gonna go back to VS Code here. I'm going to copy in this. Let's see if this does the trick. Okay, we're in business. So new packages, libgeos. Let's run that. Okay, that was pretty quick. Now let's quit this. We'll do a fresh terminal. I always like to do a fresh one after these system installs. Create our terminal. And let's load GG Veroni again. Aha, yay. Okay. Now, I remember there was one other one that had the error. It was the magic package. This one I do have a bit more experience with. Magic is based on the image magic utility for a bunch of image processing, mechanisms. So what I am going to do is go back, figure out, let me go back to my Firefox window. Let's figure out Ubuntu. I want to say it was called like libmagic or something. But the other way we could check this is we could look at the magic package CRAN page. Let's look at that. The maintainer of this, Jerome, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's a brilliant guy with the R OpenSci project. He's usually very upfront. But see, this is what I'm looking for. He spelled out very clearly which package I need on the Ubuntu or Debian-based systems. That's exactly what I was looking for. So let's go back in VS Code. We're going to install that one. Then we will be all set. So apt install libmagic ++ -dev. That's an easy one to say. Oh. In Ubuntu or Linux in general, you have to do package installs as root. Well, that looks like a hefty lot of stuff. So let's let this go. Let's see. I'll catch up in the chat here real quick. Well, Yanni, yeah, you kind of knew the punchline already about the system utilities. So it looks like there's some good discussion about Golem there too. Okay, very good. All right, so yep, we got it. And then let's go back. Again, I'm paranoid. I always quit these first. Let's launch another one. Create our terminal. And let's load the magic package. Yes, we are in business. 16 threads. Oh, that must know my massive media server setup. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the app now and see if it works. Now we may get that. Yeah, we got that esoteric thing about the browser thing. So we're going to do that again. What did I call it? Options. I have to go back to my GitHub repo, copy it in. Let me find it. All right. See, there we go. Let's run the app again. This will go in a separate window to start with, and then, yeah, it's okay. And then we'll reset that. Back to true. All right, and there we are. This is puzzle math. So Yanni, I warned you I was going to show you it, so I'll show everybody else it. So let's close the terminal for a second. So the way this app works is that you get a series of questions, and then you have to answer them in this window here. I apologize if it's a little hard to read. Let me be dangerous, see if I can zoom in on this. Yeah, I can't quite zoom in on that. But this is asking, you can choose the different signs for your question. Let's be safe and do, I get it now. You have to uncheck the ones you don't want. Yep, all right. So we just got plus, and then this is saying 9 plus 8, 17. You do that, and then now the goal of the game is that as you solve the questions, another piece of the background gets revealed to you. So now we can do new question. And this is 6 months. Yeah, we're not going to obviously do all this, but there you go. That's a fun way to illustrate, you know, helping kids with math. So that's fun. You can reduce the number of questions a bit if you want. Maybe 7. And you could do new game. Actually, let's just do a simple one. New game. 7 plus 2 is 9. Yes, I did graduate college, so I should know this. New question. 10 plus 6, 16. New question. Oh, we're getting, oh, this will be fun. Okay. 14. And then new question is 12. Yay, you win the game. Okay. Well, that's cool. Now, obviously the app is great. And actually, Yanni's got another great integration. One of his other packages called Reactor, which I'm still getting to know a bit. So he sent me some stuff to look at earlier. But the main punchline I want to do for what I'm showing you here is that we verified that this container needed 2 additional system dependencies that would not have been as obvious to find unless we diagnose those errors, which you did. But now I want to make sure that I don't have to do that every time I spin up a fresh container for this project. So I want to map what I just did over to what I do in this kind of pre-setup of containers so that I don't forget this and it's all in one place. So the way I would do that is I'm going to do it in a couple different places. So we're going to go to the dev container, Docker file. Yep, so here we are. Notice how I have this section here. Uncomment this section to add system libraries or dependencies needed for the project. Well, guess what? We do need them. I haven't memorized all the keyboard shortcuts in VSCode yet, but this is where I have a wildcard here for packages list. Let's type those in the way I found earlier, which I believe was libgeos dev, and then it was what was it? Where is that? Okay, let me copy it from my Firefox one because I don't want to have a bad typo with this or this. Okay, now when I build this container again next time, it will install these packages and we shouldn't have to do this again. So let's just get my my R session cleaned here. Q out of that. And then let's close this and we're going to reopen it and build it again. And it should not take that long. It should only be doing those bits that we needed to install those 2 libraries. So let's, no, not the palette. Control K, Control. Okay, yay. Oh, where am I? I'm still in the development environment. All right. All right. I've confused myself. All right. Close remote connection. All right. Clean slate. We're back. Okay. So let's do open folder. Now we're in the business. Okay. Puzzle math. Let's open that. Okay. Then we're going to reopen a container, and this should detect that the container changed. Yep, configuration files changed, Docker file. Rebuild that. So it's rebuilding. You get a little log here as you go if you want to really see the gory details of packages getting installed. So there it is. It's doing all those bits that we saw before. And then keep going, keep going. Boy, that's a lot of stuff. Okay. Getting there. Okay. We're there. Yep. And you notice I didn't show you the log the last time because I had things built already. But at the end is where it starts to install the extensions at the last step. So we saw it installed our editor support, the other R extension, our debugger, the Excel viewer thing. Yep. So good. We are done with that. And now let's create an R terminal. And we'll run the app again one more time. But this time it should run out of the box without a lot of fuss. Other than that browser thing. Yeah, of course. All right. So, oh, that's annoying quick, isn't it? Yeah. Let's see if it's in my command history. No, it's not. It shouldn't be in my command history. It's a fresh container. I'm going to have this in muscle memory at some point. And I thought they had solved this in a recent version, but apparently not. So let's do that. Run the app again. That's interesting. Yep, okay, it does show up. And then disable. Oops. Ah, all right. True. Just to show you all I'm not crazy. Oh, I wonder it's because I didn't close all this. So, not everything's perfect as you can see, but when it was working, it was working well. I'll have to, maybe I didn't reset something here. That or another. Okay. So, great. Well, that's kind of in a nutshell how all this looks in action. It was certainly a lot to digest, and as I said, I am most definitely not a huge expert in VS Code yet, although I am kind of learning as I go. But I think what I've shown is that you now have a choice of how to pivot between different environments, but still keep the same underlying structure. So I'll get back to the browser here. I would more than welcome contributions to this repository. If you see things that could be a lot better, I'd love to, talk about it and make this, even more seamless. I'll kind of scroll to what I want to fix more for next time. As you saw, I had a way to kind of manually copy in the bits of the setup of like the VS Code files, the RStudio files and all that after the fact. But I wish there was a way to kind of seamlessly put those all in at like maybe a function call or something like that. That would be really cool. And then you saw that I had to override manually the .r profile file to make sure it was VS Code aware. It would be great if there was a way I could automate that somehow. I know how to do it. Now I've done it a few times, but it would, me being lazy, of course, I'd love to find a way to make that better. So, so let me go back to the chat here. So certainly, I really, really appreciate you coming on and having that great dialogue with me. Seems like most of you liked it, I hope. So we'll definitely do it again. And I'll plug it one more time. Let's go back to the source. If you want to, have feedback on where we go in the future, please fill out this little survey. The link is in the description below, especially in what topics you're interested in, because I have ones that I'm definitely interested in, but I definitely want your feedback on ones that I should, target first. So, and like I said, this will not be the last one by any means. And we have more content with the Shiny Dev series itself. I have another episode that I'm going to polish up for release very soon. I have another great guest who's been a brilliant practitioner in the community for a long time. She's got a lot of great insights. You'll be hearing from her in a few days as I get that polished up. And yeah, this has gone, I think, relatively smoothly. There's been a lot of work to get this to this point. The tech in front of me, if you saw my tweet earlier, it's a hodgepodge of many things, but you do what you can to get the job done, right? So again, thanks for joining. Well, this will be posted on YouTube after it gets all the processing bits, and I'll be glad to talk with you all again. And I do have big plans, and if you like the content, you definitely don't want to miss the future episodes. So there's that little subscribe thing somewhere below here. Go ahead and click that. And obviously, I think most of you are aware of this, but this is all, this part here is most definitely not my day job. This is all just me trying to give back to the community. I've done a lot of investment in this, both in time and frankly, some money. You don't want to know how much the camera costs that I'm using right now. But I want to make it so that this is a really nice production. So if you do want to help out even just a little bit, there is a link in the description for a little tip that you could give. I always feel guilty asking for these things, but I want to make this better. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Constantine. Oh, that's nice of you. The little alerts still work. That was a lot of troubleshooting 2 nights ago. All right. So I think we're going to close up shop here. As always, go to shinydevseries.com for all the previous episodes. And again, take that survey link below if you want to send your feedback to what you want to see in the future. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time. Until then, that is end of streaming line. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks again.